Your problem is not technology. The problem is you. You lack the will to change.
Then help us change.
The day the Earth stood still, it's all about giving mankind a second chance to get it right. Especially in this day and age with the global warming and pollution and everything else that we've done to this planet. Our message is the timely thing.
The evidence that we are doing potentially irreparable harm to the environment is pretty irrefutable. So I think it was one of those happy coincidences that this was actually the first time that Fox had worked on a movie that was deemed to be a green movie.
A very strange thing happened on this film, which was that an enormous corporation said to the likes of me, we want to get serious about trying to be ecologically sane on this project, and we will even make time and staff and money available to begin that process.
News Corp, Fox's parent company, has decided to become carbon neutral by 2010, and so Fox Studios is running with that mandate and trying to make sure that all of its operations, including its physical productions, are also carbon neutral by 2010.
This industry in particular is not necessarily tailor-made for green thinking, so it's a real challenge. Most of what we do is disposable by nature. We build sets, shoot film, use makeup products, drive vehicles, all of which just expend. So one of the challenges is to figure out ways to kind of close the loops of consumption.
It is a big job on a show this big with, multiple weeks of prep, multiple stages, multiple locations, sets changing all the time, a big crew. So how do you get 350 people who have been used to multiple different practices change their ways overnight?
We have two Fox Eco Green people that have been assigned to our show, Matt Cooper and Dave Beck, and they're good with talking to each department, walking through what they have in place and what works best.
Part of what we're here to do really is just to remind people, to be the voice that says, here we are, and we're just trying to advocate this. We're not going to hit you over the head with a stick, but please think about the environment.
To get the word out to all the departments at the beginning of production, Matt and I met with all the department heads. We met with construction.
We met with construction department, costume department, makeup, wardrobe, transport, and just sort of got together with people at an early stage to let them know what it was all about.
First screen film that I've ever worked on, and everybody on the crew has been made aware, and it's amazing that nobody is going, well, this is goofy. Everyone is digging into it with zealousness.
The studio had mandated as a very aggressive mandate that we use 20% biofuel products in our generators. We managed to find a supplier here who does 40%. So we were able, in one sense, to exceed the mandate.
Biodiesel is produced from crops which are grown as opposed to extraction from petrodiesel. So when you have a blend of biodiesel and petrodiesel, it's better for the environment in the long run. Also, there's a lot of vehicles going to and from location and things, so what we've been trying to encourage is use of hybrid technology. So when somebody's doing a lot of miles or kilometres in a vehicle, to encourage them to be in something that's a little smaller, a little more fuel efficient, so encouraging practices in that way.
Transport department's a big one, so learning not to idle your vehicle on set for hours and hours, sitting in there.
The idle-free mandate is that if you're sitting in your car for more than 3 minutes, especially a transport driver, they have to turn off the engine. So we walk around knocking on windows every now and then.
Yeah, they're a little bit scared of us, or they pretend to be when we're around anyway. One of the other things that we sort of advocate is protecting these sensitive locations. So when a big film crew turns up with 100 trucks and 300 or 500 crew, it's just to have people to make sure that they leave as few footprints behind as possible.
We're in environmentally sensitive places as it is, because we've been in a lot of forests, we've been by a lot of water, so we have to just be very careful, especially when we do our explosions. 3, 2, 1, action! We have to talk to effects and make sure that any diesel or napalm or whatever is really going to get burnt off and it's not going to sink into the ground and then get into the groundwater.
Another way that we've been able to eliminate wastage is changing our attitude and our methods with the use of costly and damaging chemicals.
One of the jobs we have to do is break down on our costumes to make it look aged or old or muddy. And over the years, they've used products that have not been environmentally friendly. Some have been harmful to your health, but there's nothing like good old natural real mud. So this is mud we've collected from the scene that we shot, and we'll just simply wipe it on. It'll dry. We'll have the real product that we used on the day of filming, and then in the studio we can match the mud for any interior scenes that come after that. And that seems to work quite well, and we don't have to worry about the chemicals and the nasty products that have been used in the past for breakdown.
We're also trying to use more environmentally friendly solvents and dyes that are not as harmful to humans and the environment. Our costume department is actually keeping all the solvents, so when they wash the costumes, they're in a big setup where the water is actually stored in a big tank and they dispose of it in a rather environmentally friendly way.
Some departments have a lot of visible waste, i.e. construction. That was going to be, I think, one of their main focuses or hurdles because of just the very concrete, immense nature of the kind of work that they have to do.
I mean, we're probably the second most wasteful department in an inherently wasteful business. So there was a lot of discussion about just generally minimizing the use of resources in every which way that we can.
The construction department, they use a lot of lumber, they use a lot of timber, so they went out and they found wood that would otherwise never have been used and used that on some of their set elements.
For instance, in situations like the Barnhart set, where we had to produce like a tremendous amount of red cedar that was fairly large dimensionally. And we decided that the best way to do it was to be able to find suppliers who were milling deadfall that was blown down in recent storms. So we had some fairly large cedar trees that fell down on the Sunshine Coast, and we were able to just be able to take that material and as opposed to falling other lumber. This is a set that has to be designed and built as a modular set. We chose aluminum to build it, which is kind of strange, but I mean, ultimately, we know that aluminum can be very easily recycled without too much problem. And in terms of the scrap aluminum, I mean, it's very, very cheap and economical to return and be resmelted.
In our construction department, which I think is one of the bigger users of raw materials, we're going to attempt to reuse and recycle our set elements as much as we can. For example, there's a wall you'll see in the back that's a huge mountain that's granite. That was our mountain set at the beginning of the production. So we've made a point of recycling actual sets over and over again on this film.
Virtually anything that is usable is picked up and reused so that we're not using twice as much material to do the same job. But then after that, we also send an awful lot of our material off to other shows, like all of our tables, our chairs. They'll buy it on, sort of 10 cents on the dollar. There goes to Habitat for Humanity and whatnot. But the most important thing is that it gets used and it stays out of the landfills.
The revolution that's going on in the motion picture industry in terms of what needs to be built and what can be done digitally, I think will also positively impact this issue. We simply don't need to build sets the way we used to in terms of the size and scope.
As the price of computing is reduced and their skill level increases, hopefully we'll be building less and utilizing less material.
Thanks. Thank you.
The industry has been one to use a lot of plastics. Plastic is basically indestructible. It's a polymer, it's produced from oil. It takes 1 million years for a piece of plastic to biodegrade. So if you don't recycle that piece, it's going to be around for a hell of a long time. So what we're trying to advocate is for people to either recycle any plastic that they're using or come up with some alternatives.
Now we're incorporating things like not using disposable dishes at our catering line. The dishes are being washed. We have silverware. Or if there's takeout, we have biodegradable utensils.
We have a lot of biodegradable utensils that we use, made out of corn, and our takeout containers are all made of bamboo as well. And we use real China plates. That's all reused every day.
Since people are more conscious, we've noticed people put all their plastics and their aluminum cans in the bins. People from the locations department have told us that there's been a significant decrease in the amount of waste that they've been generating on set.
In a lot of cases, being green doesn't mean necessarily composting or recycling, but it does mean handing stuff down through humanity. So in the case of our wardrobe department, we're going to be donating bulk of our extras and the other sort of miscellaneous wardrobe.
We take a lot of the clothes and give them to the men and women's shelters and also to nonprofit theaters so it can be used again, and then you're not wasting anything.
The biggest change, I think, is the decrease in the amount of paper wastage. I remember a couple of years ago, I was working on a film and I was given a script that was printed on both sides. And I thought to myself, how cheap that they're doing this. Now, I think the attitude would be how responsible. And that was a very conscientious change.
Paper waste is amazing. I mean, it's in every capacity that we have, from the bathrooms to kitchen to photocopying. So I think people are getting more and more used to not having paper in their hand. They don't need to have a script. They can read it online on their computer just as well as a hard copy.
In the art department, we print mountains and mountains of paper on every show, and we've tried to move big chunks of that onto a web presence so that we're actually printing less. We set up an art department website where we tried to post as much as we could of the location photos and as much as we could of the research, which otherwise would have been printed out.
We tried to set it up so that people could access information quickly and get an overview of things, but if they needed to get in and look at something in detail, then you could zoom in the various levels and you can download the actual information onto your own computer. So that's why we kind of set it up that way.
In the case of trying to move from printing location photos to looking at everything digitally, it means you have to have better screens, you have to have available screens, and the studio basically said, okay, invest in those things, get the screens when you need them and where you need them, and therefore we could print less.
One of the things that's absolutely clear is that it's not always the cheapest way to go. And, there's a lot of pressure in the film industry to be able to do things, for less money and to be able to do it more economically.
Is it more expensive to have bamboo-based plates in your catering line, or is it more expensive to be renting hybrids? The answer is yes.
But that's probably more of a factor of demand than a factor of production processes. When there's more demand for these materials, the companies that produce them will probably be able to find cheaper ways to make them.
Fox is willing to pay the difference for those kinds of initiatives, which is great, because I've never worked for a studio that's done that.
The long-term question is, what's the ultimate cost of not doing this? Because that's where we're really going. We're talking about doing something that's going to save the planet, but there's only one planet. It's finite. We have to act.
It's just part of being aware of the earth and returning and recycling, and if we can incorporate that on a large scale with a company attitude, I just think it benefits everybody.
It's only on the brink that people find the will to change. Only at the precipice do we evolve. This is our moment.